Hello, and welcome to the podcast series entitled In the Footsteps of St. Francis de Sales. My name is Father John O'Neill, and I am an oblate of St. Francis de Sales. It is my pleasure to be your host as we journey in the footsteps of this great saint. In this podcast, we will focus on the residence of the first Visitandines, commonly referred to as the Gallery, which was purchased by St. Francis de Sales in 1610. On June 6th of that year, which was the Feast of Trinity Sunday, the first three sisters of the Visitation, namely Saint Jane de Chantal, Jacqueline Favre, and Charlotte Brechard, would profess their vows before the Holy Bishop of Geneva, St. Francis de Sales. Among their entourage was also a servant named Anne Jacqueline Coste, who would eventually become the first outsister of the Visitation. Due to the growth of the original community, the sisters only lived in the gallery for a little more than 2 years. And so on October the 30th, 1612, the community moved into a larger house on the banks of the River Thiou. The sisters would remain in that location until the opening of the first monastery of the Visitation, which took place in 1614. In the 19th century, 1855, the gallery was purchased by the Sisters of St. Joseph, who continued to maintain this portion of their convent property in its original condition. The pictures of the two individuals who joined me on my visit to the gallery are Father Martin, a missionary of St. Francis de Sales, whose community graciously hosted me while I was staying in Annecy, and Sister Benedict, a sister of St. Joseph of Annecy, who was my most knowledgeable guide for the tour of the gallery. The entrance to the gallery itself, which is very simple, is located not far from the Lake of Annecy itself and the large statue of St. Francis de Sales. It's to be found just off the Rue de la Providence in the convent of St. Joseph at the address of number 10, Place au Bois in Annecy. The local phone number, if it's needed, is 0450450330. As you enter into the doorway, you can note that the original door appears to be still in place. But certainly the most important room in the gallery is the chapel where St. Francis de Sales received the first members of the newly formed community, namely Saint Jane de Chantal, Jacqueline Favre, and Charlotte de Brechard, who professed their first vows in the Congregation of the Visitation of Holy Mary on the Feast of Trinity Sunday, June 6, 1610. Please move around the chapel to see the portraits of Saints Francis and Saint Jane, along with the suitably proportioned stained glass windows of the two saints, as well as the window depicting the Sacred Heart. Once you have finished your tour of the historic chapel, please proceed up the staircase to the second floor, which leads to the actual room in which St. Jane lived while residing at the gallery. Upon entering the first two rooms, please be sure to notice several items of special interest. First, on the upper portion of the wall on the left-hand side of the room, you can see an exposed portion of the original wooden frame dating back to Roman times. This section was uncovered during one of the restorations of the building. In an adjoining room, there can be found 3 framed charts. 2 of the charts depict the family trees of both St. Francis and St. Jane, and the third is really a combination of 2 framed charts that is very helpful historically, in that they trace the major events in the lives of both saints and the corresponding history of the gallery and the various visitation monasteries in Annecy, beginning in 1567 until 1952. In addition to the charts, there are also other portraits and images of both saints, as well as descriptions in French of major themes in the life of St. Jane. Be sure to take notice of the beautiful full-length Episcopal portrait of St. Francis de Sales with crozier and holding a copy of the Introduction to Devout Life, which was first published in 1608. The second image with Francis is with his Episcopal mitre and a heart on flame representing the love of God. Also in the room there is a small collage depicting a young Jane de Chantal with one of her sayings, the English translation of which is always look to God and He will lead you. The next frame picture collage just simply has Jane Françoise Frémillot at the top. There's a beautiful picture of St. Jane as a young woman. Jane Françoise Frémillot was born in Dijon, January 23, 1572. Her father, Benign Frémillot, was president of the Parliament of Dijon. Jane was the second child. Her brother, André, became Archbishop of Bourges. Jane was 18 months old when her mother, Marguerite Berbissy, from an old Burgundian family, unfortunately died. She was raised by her father, faithful to her God and to her king. In 1587, her sister Marguerite was married to Jean-Jacques Nuchez from an old noble family of the Poitou region. Jane left home to live with her sister and remained there until her marriage. She was a young woman, cheerful, lively, intelligent, and studious. She had become accustomed to a high standard and style of living. The next framed image of Jane depicts her in the habit of the Visitation sisters. And at the top it says, Jane, spouse, and mother. The translation of the French, at Bourbilly, not far from Dijon, lived Baron Christophe Raboutin, an ardent supporter of King Henry IV. Jane married the Baron in 1592 when she was 20 years old, and her husband was 27. Their happiness lasted 8 years until the Baron died in a hunting accident in 1601. She wrote that her sorrow was indescribable. At the time of her husband's death, 4 children remained: Celse Benign, Marie Aimée, Françoise, and Charlotte, who was 15 days old. Distraught, Jane only wanted to do God's will. One day she had a vision of a guide and an unknown bishop that the Lord would send her. The next frame has a beautiful picture of a rose, and there's a saying there from St. Jane, and the translation of which, God desires your heart. This particular segment deals with Jane as a foundress. The translation of the French. The foundation of the Visitation took place on Sunday, June 6, 1610, which was the Feast of the Trinity. The day was spent visiting churches and the poor. That evening, St. Francis de Sales gave the 3 sisters, namely Jane de Chantal, Marie Jacqueline Favre, and Charlotte de Bréchard, his blessing and an abridged version of their constitution. They went to the house of the gallery, where they found Anne Jacqueline Coste, who was preparing their place. Those first days were spent in total poverty and in profound joy. Passing through the corridor outside the room where Jane lived while at the gallery house, we can now be able to enter the room itself, showing some priceless artifacts intimately related to the saint herself. It's important to note that the furniture in St. Jane's room are not the actual pieces present at the time when Jane was living at the gallery. The furnishings currently on view were donated by the Visitation Monastery as representative of pieces dating back to the 16th and 17th centuries. The coat of arms, which is on the mantel over the fireplace, are those of Monsieur de la Pesse, P-E-S-S-E, who was the previous owner of the gallery and sold the building to St. Francis de Sales. Please be sure to look closely at 2 of the most precious pictorial treasures of the gallery. First, there is the original needlepoint created by Madame Sévigné, as a gift to St. Jane, who was her grandmother. The work portrays St. Francis giving a conference to the sisters in the garden with the reflection visible in the lake of Annecy. The next painting is often referred to as the Ex Voto, and it refers to St. Francis de Sales with two of the original Visitation sisters, Jacqueline Favre and Charlotte de Brochard. St. Jane herself was not well at the time the portrait was created and could not be present. Before ending your visit to this historic site for the Visitation history, please be sure not to miss the opportunity to look over the original garden location where Francis gave his conferences to the first Visitandines during the 2+ years they were living at the gallery. This now concludes our visit to the Gallery of the Visitation. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you will continue your journey in the footsteps of St. Francis de Sales, both historically and spiritually, in some of the other podcasts available in this series.